Hello and welcome to the MG podcast, streaming live on Monday, the 20th of June, 2022. We're here to talk about all-electric MG vehicles, hoping to inform and entertain you for about an hour or so. I'm Miles Roberts, that's Miles Roberts CG on the forum. And joining us this week are, from Wigan, we have Les Burrows.
Hello, everybody. Les Burrows, same name on the forum, sorry.
From South Wales, we have Mike Fisher.
I use the name Fish to Bean on the forum.
From Crawley, we have Steve Green.
If you know, Steve is Green on the forum.
From Essex, we have Barry Hager.
Hi, Barry H on the forum.
And joining us from Surin, Thailand, we have Paul White.
Hi, I'm Paul in Thailand on the forum.
Excellent. If you're watching live, thank you for joining us, and please click on the like button and join in the discussion in the chat window. Mike will be following those comments through. If you're watching later, thank you for choosing to watch this video, and please subscribe to get a notification when we go live next time. In tonight's podcast, we're discussing the news that the UK plug-in car grant has ended. We're talking about changes to MG pricing in the UK and changes to specification of the ZS EV. And for our main topic of tonight, we're going to be talking about solar PV and battery storage. So first off, the plug-in car grant of £1,500 was stopped on the 14th of June 2022 with immediate effect. It doesn't affect any orders that were already placed where the grant claims were started by the dealers. So hopefully that's all been done. I work for a dealership, obviously, and just to let you know, we always claim the grant as soon as we've got a signed order form. The government has given 2 days of leeway, so if any orders were placed in the 2 days immediately before the 14th of June, they can claim grants on that. Perhaps it was over the weekend and they didn't have the admin staff in to do the grant portal. But basically, yeah, we had no notice. So 8 a.m. we received an email to say that the grant had stopped at 7 a.m. that day with immediate effect. So what do people think? Do you think that's a good thing that there's no more grants? Were they required? What does everyone think? Anyone?
I think it's actually a sign that we're getting some maturity in the market. That's one way of looking at it. And given that there's such a shortage of supply, why did you need a grant to encourage people to buy something that wasn't available?
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that obviously the grants dropped down. It used to be £5,000, then 4.5, then 2.5, then 1.5, with capped price levels. So it wasn't just benefiting people buying Teslas. The cap was £32,000 for the most recent change before it was cancelled. And as part of that, MG, a couple of their models were deliberately targeted below £32,000 so that they would benefit from the grant. What do people think about? Do you think manufacturers were keeping prices artificially high because they knew that £1,500 would come off them anyway and they'd get more profit? Or do you think that now there's no incentive for manufacturers to concentrate on staying below £32,000 because they're not going to get a grant anyway, so they might let prices go up anyway? What do you think?
Well, you'd be the man to ask, Miles. Were the salesmen lapping up the incentives?
I mean, to be fair, the fact that you got a grant was obviously a useful sweetener, and it makes a difference. If you're talking about finance, for example, a lot of people buy the cars on finance these days. Well, that £1,500 over a 3-year contract is about £40 a month extra that a customer would have to pay. Excuse me, my friend's son just setting the front doorbell off. The grant was, so make a difference about £40 a month. Now, £40 a month means that the payment would go from say £300 towards £350. When everybody else has got a bit of a cost of living crisis, potentially that means that budgeting for that car might be a bit harder. On the flip side,
on the flip side, you just said it. Do you think the prices are going to come down now?
Well, there are changes to the MG pricing in the UK, so I'll talk about that actually, and then we'll sort of see where we're going with that. So MG actually announced on the 13th of June, so the day before the grant was announced it was stopping. MG UK announced new pricing from the 1st of July. They're claiming in the face of rising costs for all components and everything, which, to be fair, with the 10% inflation rate in the UK, you can, and similar happening around the world, you can sort of understand. So the ZS EV standard range, you get an extra £250 on top of the SE, so it now becomes 29,495. And the ZS EV standard range trophy is going up by £500 to 31,995. So basically £32,000 for a standard range trophy, which is the price that the Trophy Connect used to be. The long range SE is going up by £500 to 31,995. And the long range trophy is going up by £500 to 34,495. Obviously, none of these get grants anymore. So the Trophy Connect model is being deleted. They're getting rid of it completely, but they are putting the live services of iSmart, which is basically what you used to get extra by getting a Connect. So the live weather, the traffic updates, the Amazon Music, that's all now going to be included in trophy models for orders taken from the 1st of July. However, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. So ZS EV trophy models from the 1st of July will no longer come with a panoramic sky roof. So the full length sunroof that we like, I personally really like on the ZS, is no longer going to be available on the ZS EV trophy model. It's not going to be an option. It's not going to be anything, so it's literally, you're going to have a hard top roof on both vehicles. The change will also affect the HS FEB and HS Petrol models from the 1st of July as well. So given that the prices have gone up and given that the grant's now been removed, and so you're looking at £32,000 for a long range SE and I say 34.5 for a long range trophy, does that mean do you think most people are going to choose an SE over a trophy now because of the extra £2,500? You can, before you used to justify it by saying, well, it's got the roof, it's got the pleather, it's got the heated seats, it's got electric seats, it's got the loss of the roof. Does that make it a bit of a deal breaker, do you think, for people? For those of you that that have got a MG ZS EV, was the roof a reason?
I got mine with the roof because I thought it's got a roof. Yes, please.
It's a big
it was a big decision for me to make the difference to go to when I got when I bought mine back 2.5 years ago when it first launched. The fact that it had the roof, I wasn't happy really with the faux leather seats, and on a sunny day like we've had recently, it's a sculpture. Even though I have got the glass tinted as an aftermarket, so I would have much preferred to have had the fabric seats. But I
was going to say, Barry, my thought was the same. I'd rather they gave got rid of the pleather seats, but still kept perhaps the heating elements, but gave it as a cloth seat with a glass roof.
Yeah.
But that's not a choice we've got.
But Miles, do you think this is sort of in preparation for the model lineup of the MG4?
The MG4, we'll have to have a talk about that, won't we, once we get a bit more information. But yeah, the spy images that have been, the early images from China that have been released that show a panoramic non-opening roof. It could be a way of sort of positioning it so that if you're wanting if you're wanting a glass roof, then the MG4 is the way forward. They've explained it as being, coming off the HS FEV and off the ZS EV and also off the ZS Petrol, a couple of models on that, they're taking the glass roof off. And they've explained it basically as a cost-saving measure due to predicted increase in component costs on those items. So presumably the supplier has changed or something, and the new quote was horrendous, so that's why they're getting rid of them. But I think it's a shame. I think that a glass roof would have been.
Did you say, Miles, it's going to be available as an option?
No, it's not going to be available as an option. No, part of MG's plan is that they don't really do that many options. You've basically got two. two specifications and a choice of colours, and that way they don't need to worry. They can batch build then.
Yeah.
So options aren't really something in MG's vocabulary really. So yeah, I think Mike, is there any people on the chat saying anything about that change?
Chef says omitting the sky roof is a big mistake. Same with Paul. He says it's a bad move. David's no sunroof, no MG. It was a great enticement to get people to try the ZS EV. A lot of people, by the looks of it.
I mean, just to clarify, if you've already got an order in before the 1st of July, the price rise won't take effect until the 1st of July, and this spec change only takes effect from the 1st of from the orders placed from the 1st of July. So if you've got your order in already,
anyway, can we?
Say again?
But we can't order anything at the moment anyway.
No, but if you've got an order already in, is what I mean. So if you've already ordered your car and you're waiting for it, you're not going to lose the roof before delivery. So it's small comfort, I suppose, to people that have already got their orders in. But you're right, yeah. I mean, at the moment, MG suspended ordering. Well, we stopped on this MG5 because that's in anticipation of the model running out, basically, and then they've basically sold all of this year's allocation, and then at the end of the year, we're going to see the new facelift MG5 in the UK. The ZS EV got to a 9-month wait for, again, they basically sold out this year by February. So they're trying to catch up with orders. They stopped taking orders on the ZS EV. Having said that, I suppose it's they must be reopening them soon, otherwise they wouldn't have announced this price change. But yeah, so just to negate everyone out before we start the conversation. There we go. Things are getting more expensive, and you're not going to have the roof. There we go. And
same with anything. You go and buy. I bought some Maltesers the other day, and there was normally 120 grams in them in the box, and now there's only 100 grams in them. The same thing.
Shrinkflation. Yeah, that's
shrinkflation. Exactly what it's called. Yeah, exactly. They're just cutting. You're getting the same article for the same price, but you're going to get in part of what you used to get. You're not getting any more. It's the same with the cars. They're cutting back on things that's going to keep the price reasonable. If they can keep the price down as much as possible by cutting the extras that's on from model to model, that's what they're doing. Basically, they're trying to keep the prices down as much as possible by admitting things. But I think it's a bad move taking the sunroof off personally.
I mean, to give you an idea of what we're seeing on other brands, so the Kia Niro EV, the new facelift model, which is coming to dealers in July, has had £1,000 price increase before it's even landed. The Kia EV6 has had a £2,500 price increase on all models.
Yeah.
The Nissan Ariya has seen, I think, a £1,500 price increase.
Well, the Aura Cat was recently came across, and originally when we first saw that, it was sort of headline, it would be coming in around about 25 grand or just below.
And now it's 32.
The price that's come on, it's over 30.
Yeah,
so it's massive, big difference.
Well, I think the 25 per grand was originally thinking it was going to get a £2,500 grant, which obviously stopped.
Yeah, but even before they stopped the grant miles, they did put it out at being 30 grand.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, it's going to be 30. It was originally, they said 25 grand after the £2,500 grant. That was back in November. Then in December, the grant changed. So that would have then made it 26 grand. And then there's been some inflation since then. So that's added another couple of grand onto the cost. And then the 15 grand's gone. And then they're launching with a higher spec model, I suppose, as well, which then pushed price even further. I think that the grant. The problem we've got is that the grant was great, but it was also indiscriminate in that people would get it. We'd get a grant. We'd claim a grant on a car we register as a demonstrator for the garage, for example. Yeah, which it doesn't help us to buy it because we're going to register it anyway. It just means that we've got an extra £1,500 off the price, so it's not costing us as much to register them. Whereas obviously if you get rid of the grants, then that, sort of side aspect of it finishes. But I do think there needs to be some sort of incentive brought in for people who are on lower incomes or, people who, there's a lady posted on one of the Facebook groups today saying that she's a nurse. She's earning £26,000 a year, single parent, currently running a VW Polo that's costing her £300 a month in fuel. But she says, well, what can I get that's electric that's going to cost me less than £300 a month, including the car and the electric together? Because the Polo is worth like less than £1,000. It's not anything. And there's not really anything out there really under £300 a month on a lease, particularly with this extra grant going now. You're looking at it's going to cost an extra sort of £40-50 a month compared to where it would have been. I think there needs to be some help given, whether it's a scrappage scheme or what, some sort of additional incentive. I think for.
I count myself lucky basically in the fact that I went in when I did, which is like 16 months ago, roughly, give or take. And we got the 3.5 off the government, and they got the 4 off MG's incentive to buy. At the time, it was £4,000, I think. And as well as I do, I've been waiting now for over 12 months for the MG3 electric to materialise, but never did, or it hasn't appeared yet. And now we're talking about the MG4 because my wife's going mad for one. So at the end of the day, she just wanted a small hatchback, which the MG3 would fit in the bill perfectly, but I wouldn't let her buy the petrol. I said, no, you're not having the petrol.
Well, the MG4 is the MG4 sort of ID3 size, so it's it's ever so slightly bigger.
Yeah. I could talk her into that, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, it looks like some fantastic car. I think we'll do a special feature on the MG4 coming up.
Many of the B channels have been saying that we need smaller cars, for more affordable.
Exactly, Steve.
Cars.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not happening.
No, it's not.
I mean,
I mean, the Auracat's not that small from what I've seen of it.
No, it's the same size as the MG4, to be fair.
Yeah.
The Citroen Ami is a bit too small, I think.
28 miles an hour, yeah.
28 miles an hour, yeah.
I tried that one, Miles. I tried that. She's not worrying that at all. 28 miles an hour, no chance.
Yeah, I know we like you say, we need a small, like my first car when I learned to drive was a Fiat Cinquecento, in betweener style. And my eldest son is going to be 17 next year. And I'm thinking what car I could get him as a first car. And you sort of think, the original Fiat Cinquecento, yes, it had an NCAP score that was in the negatives, but it weighed 700 kilos or slightly less. It was, 40 brake horsepower, but it was all you needed, and I went to Scotland in it, went all over the place, So I think that we could do with more smaller cars that are, cheap to insure, cheap to run, and if they're, ideally electric, but. Anyway, look, right, getting off the topic a bit. Let's pull it back to the main topic of conversation, which will be solar. So solar PV and battery storage. I'll admit I've kind of been pushing for this as a topic because I've literally just had solar array installed at my house. I've got 8 solar panels on my house, a Tesla Powerwall in my garage. All of our contributors on here have had solar panels fitted or are waiting for them to be fit. And many of us also have battery storage too. So opening this up to what we're going to talk about, we're going to go through what needs to be considered. Paul in Thailand, our roving reporter, you are the main man here in terms of living off grid. So perhaps if I hand over to you, perhaps you can sort of start to take us through some of this.
Yeah, thanks, Miles. First of all, as always, it's 2 a.m. here, so I apologize if I stumble over my words. First thing to say that there is a thread for the podcast, and all the photos are in there, so you can have a look at that as well. So the first photo that I've posted is a photo of my car, which is the HS plug-in hybrid. And it's plugged into an MG charger, and above it you can see some solar panels. I actually did this the opposite way around. I started with solar, and then I spent 2 years fighting with MG to let me have a car that I could plug into solar, because here in Thailand they couldn't believe that solar would have enough power to charge a car. So that's why I got the solar first and the car second. So the first question is, if you're an EV owner, why would you consider getting solar? And I mean, the obvious answer that comes to mind is the cheapest electrons you can get are the ones that would come off your solar panels. They're cheaper than what you'd buy from the grid. They're cheaper than, you know, if you plug in on a public charger. So that's obviously one factor. Another factor that I think is very important is being independent. You know, I mean, you could, to use an example which quite often comes up, is the zombie apocalypse. If that was to happen, if you had your EV, you could go out and collect all your supplies, and you'd have power for your electric fence and stuff like that. But the point we're trying to make here is that you're not reliant on an electricity supplier. You're literally making it at home. You wouldn't be able to make your gasohol at home or your ethanol, but you can make electrons to put into your car, and that's a very satisfying thing. If we can look at the graph, which is the next thing that I posted, and the graph is taken from one of my 5 kilowatt inverters, and I think it's quite a good. I know people don't like looking at graphs, but it's actually quite a good visual representation of what we're trying to do here. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to do self-consumption. If you want to save money with solar, you want to do as much self-consumption as possible. I know there are feed-in tariffs, but they're never as good as using your own power. So if you can look at the graph there, you see I have this great big yellow solar production. And my inverter, if it's not being used, it's actually shown as curtailment. So I produce a load of power in the middle of the day, and it then disappears because there's nowhere for it to go. The batteries are full, and that's the point. So I charge my batteries up, and then I plug in my car. So what we want to try and do, if you want to get a good, quick return on your investment with your solar, if you've got a car and you've got house batteries, you put the power into your house batteries first, and then you can put it into your car. So you're basically using as much of the power as you can, really, and that's a real incentive, to get solar if you've got an EV. One little thing I was told not to be too technical is about vehicle to load, because the new MGs are coming with vehicle to load. And if you have a solar system, it's much easier to feed power from your car into a solar system, because a lot of these inverters come, already set up to receive power from a generator and that sort of thing. So that's an ideal situation where your house is powering your car, and you can trickle charge your batteries through a vehicle to load situation. So that would be much easier to do if you had a solar system. Anyone else want to chip in on this first one? Why?
It's exactly what I'm looking at, Paul. I'm trying to get my solar array extended, made bigger, twice as big, and then hopefully at some point in the future I could get a car with a vehicle to load facility on it, the MG ZS or whatever, or the MG5 when it comes, the new one. And that's the way I'm going. I've watched quite a lot of stuff on YouTube recently of people doing this, and I'm only talking light loads. I'm not talking massive amounts of power. I'm just talking light loads, sort of TVs, lights, that kind of thing in the evening time, which could quite easily run off the vehicle to load situation, in my opinion, anyway. So I'm going to get the solar array extended first, doubled, and then I can get somebody to do it, and then see how we go with that when I get the new car, rather than going for the solar array and a battery. Because I'm at home every day. I'm retired now. We don't work. We're at home all the time. We can do everything while the sun's out, more or less. All we've got in the evening is basically TVs and lighting. There's not much else going on in the evening. Everything's coming off the solar during the day. The water gets heated up. The car gets charged if it needs it. whatever. And we're going to end up with 2 cars, possibly even 3, because my son has a Tesla Model X as well. And when he's here, he plugs it in and it uses a lot of power. But when the sun's out, I don't care. He can have as much as he wants when the sun's out. So that's my object now, to get this solar array that I've got at the moment doubled, at least up to 6 or 6.5 kilowatts, which is all I could get on it, really. And then I'll look at the vehicle to the low side of it if and when I get a new car, if it ever comes. So that's what I'm thinking. I think it'll work myself personally. The batteries are quite expensive, aren't they? They're very expensive to buy the batteries.
Yeah.
So if you've got a car sitting there with 50 kilowatt battery, a 60 kilowatt battery, whatever, doing nothing all day, might as well use it.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, what you were saying about you charge your battery first, then you charge your car. So today I did literally that. So today's been quite a good weather day here in Yorkshire. I've generated almost 21 kilowatt hours of electricity today off my little 8-panel system.
Brilliant.
But when it's by 1 o'clock, my Tesla Powerwall, which is a 13.8 kilowatt hour battery, when that already got to like 95% full by 1 p.m. today. So I ran outside and put the MG5 on granny charger, because my charger I've got in my house, it's I've got a 7 kilowatt hour Anderson charger, which does have a solar option, but I haven't got the CT clamp sorted for it yet. So I ran outside and put it on the granny charger, which will draw 2.3 kilowatts.
Yep.
My inverter can only do 2.3 kilowatts on my system. So effectively, within full sun, just that'll provide the car. But the good thing about the Powerwall is that that can then run the extra 300 watts that the rest of the house was using. So my house, I don't know if this is typical, and you guys will have to, let me know what you're like. Our detached house, it's a fairly new build. It's 2015. It was built. LED lights throughout. My work is on a laptop with the monitor, so it's fairly low consumption PC. Fridges and so on, going about 300 to 350 watts seems to be my base load. So when I plugged in the car today, so basically the car was taking the stuff off the grid, off the solar, and then the Powerwall was filling in the other 0.3 kilowatts to the house. And the benefit of me doing it that way is that then once the sun starts to wane and move around, then the Powerwall ups its performance, but the charger still continues to charge at 2.3 kilowatts. So my car, so today my house hasn't actually used any grid power at all yet today. So it got through till 6 a.m. using the power it had generated yesterday. It started, the solar came up this morning. It started charging the battery. I put my car into charge at 1 o'clock. I'd done about 40, 50 miles in the MG5. So it had about, I guess, 10, 12 kilowatt hours spare in the battery that needed topping up. So it's just finished at about 7 o'clock. It had finished charging that on the granny charger. So I've run the house. I've also done a load of washing, done a load of tumble drying, run the whole house, and filled the battery in the car, and not used any grid at all yet. And possibly might get through till 6 a.m. without needing any grid at all. Although the Powerwall does have this sort of smart feature where if it thinks you're going to run out, it'll top itself up on off-peak tariff. So at some point tonight, it might charge itself a bit from the grid just to make sure it's got enough to get through till when the sun comes up tomorrow.
I think you're right about that sort of base load thing. I got a little bit analytical about it, but certainly tracking it day to day, the base load on my house, I got a 4-bedroom detached house, and the base load is between 200, 250 and 350. It varies depending on fridges kicking in and so on.
Yeah.
So I just took that as a figure, and I looked at that. Even at night, it's sort of like ticking over with various bits and pieces. It doesn't vary that much throughout through the day, and it's only when you cook, put a kettle on, or plug the car in that things really move away from that. So if you go 250 watts, shall we say, and you have 24 hours a day, well, then that's 6 kilowatt hours a day if you can cover that, then you're only then using it, you know, even on a basic level, you're only using the grid for the top off, the little extra.
Very small amounts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And for short periods.
Yeah, so I mean, I looked this morning. So I've got a big spike on my graph this morning where I put the toaster on and boil the kettle at the same time. So I had like 4 kilowatts load at that point. But like you say, you know, it's only for a couple of minutes, and then it's back down again, isn't it? And then with my sorry, I was just seeing some pictures of my solar and everything going on there. So yeah, so I've got my roof. I've got a 2-level roof. So I can only have panels on the upper level of the roof because it basically would shade itself otherwise. And I've got Velux windows as well, so I could potentially have fit, like, I don't know, an extra 2 panels. But the thought was that the extra cost plus the shading probably wasn't going to be worth it. Although I am thinking that probably the garage roof that you can see in that lower photo there, that could probably have been quite prime. That's south facing, is that section of roof. I could probably fit another 4 panels on there.
Yeah.
But again, it's the extra cabling, the extra cost of, you know, doing all that, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, the extra install cost.
But as it is, as I say, with my 3.1 kilowatts of panels, my 2.3 kilowatt limited inverter, I've still managed to generate 21 kilowatt hours today. And that's been enough to run my house and, as I charge the car up, and the battery is what makes it possible. I think yesterday was a very cloudy day. And so I think I generated something like 10 or 11 kilowatt hours yesterday. So almost half of what I did today, did today. So I think the battery does give you that flexibility, so that in winter, when naturally I'm not going to be generating as much, I can always charge the battery off peak, and so the Powerwall will do it itself. It'll come up with that as a solution. If it thinks you're going to need, 10 kilowatt hours to get you through the next day because it's only going to generate 1 or 2 kilowatt hours of solar, it'll do that on the off peak tariff. The only limit I see,
yeah, sorry, Paul's situation is completely different because you're off grid, aren't you, Paul?
Well, I'm not 100% off grid. In the monsoon season, we can get 3 days of continuous rain. So and this is the problem with going to off grid, is that, the last 5% can cost you as much as the first 95, because you're then trying to cover multiple days, so yeah.
That's what I was going to say with the Tesla Powerwall gives the option of doing off grid as well. So in the event of a power cut, it'll take over as a battery support for the house automatically without having to do anything. Or I can press a button on the app and I can make it go. Ooh, the phone is there. Make it go off grid as well. So I can selectively go off grid if I wish to. Yeah, I mean, so far, I'd say my initial thing from looking at my electric bill costings is that on a daily basis, I used to be putting about £3 to £4 a day of electric, and I'm on a really, really cheap tariff as well. I'm on the Octopus Go 830, so I'm currently paying 13 pence peak and 5.5 pence off peak, which is scandalous in today's market. But even I was paying sort of £3 or £4 a day on that old tariff to cover my house and charging the electric cars. We've got 2 electric cars, and now it's averaging sort of £1.20 a day.
Yeah.
So the cost. Yes, the cost is difference is massive.
Yeah,
I think in winter, if I can charge that,
stayed the same, which amazed me. I'm on 15.
What was it, Steve?
And 5. I'm on 5 off peak and 15 on peak, and that was changed in February, I think.
Yeah, mine flipped over in April, and I didn't expect to keep it, which is part of the reason why I'd invested in the solar, because I thought that if I was going to go to the new Go tariff, which is 35 pence peak and 7.5 off peak, I wanted to do nothing at all on peak. And so far,
wow.
Yeah. So far, touch wood, I haven't used any peak electricity since it was installed.
My system is a hybrid system, and it will trickle through the day, and I will use approximately 1/4 to 1/2 kilowatt a day of peak power. But in the big scale of things, to me, that's nothing, and I can live with that quite happily. It's
Yeah. So Paul,
I don't know if I can do off grid yet. I'm still.
I'll get back to the agenda, shall I?
yeah. So yeah. Sorry.
All right.
Yeah.
So the final point really to say on this is that if you go with solar, what you're effectively doing is that you're buying your electricity forward. So the cost of your electricity, you're mitigating that by buying your solar, and therefore you're protecting yourself from price rises. So I'm going to move on to talk about solar panels, and bearing in mind the last words that were said to me before we started was not to make it too technical. But it is worth mentioning about price because, and I think this applies to everything, is that the prices of anything with technology seem to be creeping up, and panels are getting more expensive. I mean, I started looking about 6 years ago and there was a big drop. But the last couple of years, the prices have been creeping up. So, I mean, nobody's really interested in what they cost in Thailand, but what are they in the UK? What solar panels cost?
So for the 8-panel system that I have, if I hadn't got a battery as well, it would have been about £5,000.
Yeah.
Seems to be a fairly typical sort of cost, I think.
That's about right.
So five, depending on the quality of the panels you go for and things, it's about, I think you can get the cheapest sort of 8-panel systems about £4,000. But then you've got, usually there's some hidden extras like, scaffolding and stuff like that you got to pay for on top. My total system cost for the solar panels, the installation, the battery, everything, the power wall, was £15,700. Thanks to the no VAT that we have now on when you buy. If you buy a battery on its own, you have to pay 20% VAT. If you buy it with solar, you get it rated the same as solar, which has just dropped from 5% to 0 in the UK. So that saved me a bit. So it cost £15,700. I'll be honest, I didn't have that sat in the bank account, so I was due to remortgage this spring. So I did, borrowed the extra money on my mortgage. It's cost me about £30 a month, if that. Extra on the mortgage, but I'm saving potentially sort of £60 or £80 a month on my electric bill, so I'm quite happy with that investment. And I think that's that's one of the things. Obviously, again, this comes back to what we were talking about with electric cars, is that it's all very well for me to sit in a 4-bed detached house that's worth a ridiculous amount of money and be able to borrow this money to put solar panels and everything on the house, and save my money, save myself from energy poverty that way. If I didn't have the solar panels on, and I was, and if I was on a fixed rate tariff like a lot of people are, my electric bill would be close to sort of £6,000 a year, which would be fairly unsustainable, I think. So the fact that I'm looking at it now costing me sort of around sort of £30 a month or whatever is probably quite good, really. So yeah, I think
the benefit.
Yeah, so I see it as a long-term investment, and I say that's why I put it on the mortgage, because I thought it's going to probably pay back as much as, if not better than, sticking an extension on the house or something. So
don't get too how can I say, Miles? You remember your early days yet? You've only had a few weeks. Your system's only been installed a few weeks. As the year goes on and the winter comes in, you'll see the massive difference. And you think, oh, blimey, was it worth it? Was it not worth it? But over time, I've had mine now 10 years. 10 years on a cycle. Unbelievable. It's just paid for itself over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me, I was looking at whether solar itself would pay for me on its own. And for our usage, I didn't think it would. I think that the power wall is what makes it more usable for me. Because I say out of the 20 kilowatt hours of electricity I've generated today, the house without a battery would only have been able to use sort of 6 kilowatt hours during the actual lifetime that it was light outside. Whereas, and so that would have 14 kilowatts that had gone to the grid and paid me, is it 3 pence or 5 pence feed-in at the moment? Or
Feed-in, sorry, 4.5.
I'll call it feed-in. It's SEG, isn't it? They call it now.
Yeah.
I would have a solar tariff and I let 10 kilowatts go to the grid today because my battery was full, my car battery was full.
Can't do anything.
I don't know where to put it.
I used to sell solar back in the day, back in 2011 and 12, through that period and into 13 actually. So we went through that big transition with the feed-in tariffs and things like
Yeah.
that. And I had solar fitted at the end of 2011, and I had a southeast and a southwest facing roof. I put half on one, half on the other, and that gave me an extended day because the directions of the panels were pointing.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, it was really well. You couldn't match your usage to the generation. So now, having moved, and I'm in the process of putting them up now. I've been a bit of a delay on the install, but what I've done is I've split my investment between half for on the roof and half for in the garage in the batteries, because I might not live here for to get the full life out of those batteries and move on. And I thought, well, I want to make it so the battery, at least I could pull the plug, take it with me,
Take it with you, yeah,
to make sure that I get my full value out.
Exactly. Plug it out, take it with you.
Yeah.
So Paul, obviously you've gone more off grid than any of the rest of us. So how big is your system? Can you just tell everyone how many
Massive.
panels you've got, how many kilowatts of panels, how many batteries, and where do you see the biggest gains in terms of investment? Is it batteries? Is it solar? Is it, both?
Well, people always say to me, that when they're looking at solar, they're looking to make a financial return. And that tends to be the number one thing people talk about. And I tend to say, well, if you're really only interested in the financial side, if you're only interested in the very short payback, then you go for a small system. So, I mean, my payback is going to be much longer because I have a big system. But I live in a country where the electric goes off quite regularly. And if somebody asks me, what's it worth to you to be the only house in the village with lights on? And I'll say priceless, So there are some factors that are not really economic. The batteries, what they do is they allow you to spread the load in the fact that you are producing power they call it the duck curve, which is the back of the duck is where you're actually making the power, but the tail and the head of the duck is where you're using it. So what you can do, and Miles, you actually mentioned this already, is you can try and move your loads around. So for instance, my freezer, I have a big chest freezer, that's on a timer. So I have a big stack of ice at the bottom of the chest freezer. It doesn't run at night, so I'm not running it off my batteries. I do have an ice maker that runs in the middle of the day. I do the laundry in the middle of the day, these sorts of things. Even if you're not in the house, you could set your laundry on a timer. Anything you can do to use the power, because as you're saying, the feed-in tariffs are just not worth it. So yeah, I have a 20 kilowatt of solar. Maybe we should talk about it when we actually do the review of the system. So I'll leave that for a little bit and get back onto the what we're talking about here, because people might be saying, what is orientation and what's elevation? So orientation basically is what direction your panels are facing. And a lot of people think, oh, if I don't have south facing roof, it's not worth doing. But as Barry's already mentioned, if you have west and east, you're going to get morning sun, you're going to get evening sun, which is when you're going to be using power. So don't be put off solar because your roof isn't perfect. So that's one thing. And the elevation, I mean, the advice that people tend to take is whatever latitude you're at. So I'm at 15 degrees. So my panels are set at 15 degrees. I mean, in the UK, it'd be something like 50. But your roofs in the UK are designed to shed snow where mine are not. So, but most people just tend to fit the panels based on what their roof is. It may not be the perfect setup, but it's the easiest. If you set up a complicated tracking system, you're not going to make any value out of that.
I think most UK houses got a roof angle of about 30 to 35 degrees.
35, yeah. 35, 40.
Yeah, I think mine's about 30. So it's not optimal, but it's, I say, my system was generating more than I could possibly use today. So, well, would have been more than I could possibly use had I not been at home and been able to plug the car in. Okay, so inverters. Now, I didn't do enough research on this before my system was fit. So I got my system quote through and it says 3.12 kilowatt hours of kilowatt P, KWP, kilowatts of panels, basically, maximum output. And then, you know, there's such and such inverter, which is a solar edge inverter. And I didn't realize that the inverters were sized differently. So my inverter that they quoted me for was 2.3 kilowatts peak. Now today, it's been clipping quite a lot. So I've got like a whole lot of flat spots at the top of my generation because it's not been able to actually output what would have been probably close to sort of 2.8 towards 3 kilowatts. I'd imagine it's a beautiful blue sky day today. And obviously we're almost on the longest day of the year here in the UK. So it would have been probably, you know, nudging towards the maximum output of the panels. So yeah, I suppose, you know, should I have upscaled the inverter? Should I have gone for a bigger inverter to avoid clipping? Or, you know, in a couple of years when the panels have aged slightly and let's face it, the weather's not always like it is today, would I actually notice the difference for the extra investment? I suppose it's one of those, isn't it? What's your thoughts? Have you had to upscale your inverters, anyone, or change your inverters or done anything like that?
I've had to change my inverter because of the positioning of it was awful. Because my solar system was already on the house and I bought it 4 years in, and the positioning of the inverter was in the loft. It didn't have any kind of Wi-Fi tracking on it. It was made by a company which went bust very soon after it was fitted. So I decided to get it upgraded to a solar edge system as well. And actually I saw an improvement of the output because of the solar edge uses optimizers on the back of the panels as well. So yeah, I've had to change over one of the inverters I've got because if I couldn't track what it was outputting, it was literally like there's power coming through it or there's no power coming through it. I couldn't see with the system, and to go up and check how much it was outputting with that inverter was go up to the loft, crawl along the loft, and then look at the little panel.
Take a torch with you. Yeah, okay. Mike, how much did the replacement inverter cost you?
This was back in 2018, so it was about 5.5 to get the new inverter put in, and also all the optimizers.
The solar
yeah, having to underneath all the panels,
yeah, and also all the scaffolding because it was also a double scaffolding because of I got west-east panels on the main house.
Ah, right, okay.
So double the cost of the scaffolding as well.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's quite important really with the inverters is, I mean, if the salesman is trying to sell you something, is what the salesman doesn't know is what your potential future plans are going to be. Are you thinking of adding batteries later? Are you hoping to perhaps expand your system later? These are the sorts of things where you really have got to do your research. I mean, when I bought my inverters, I bought them and I imported them from China, the inverters and the batteries. They're made by different companies, but these are two companies that work together, and the smart batteries, so they communicate with network cables into the inverters. So I'm getting all that information. So all I'm just trying to say here is do your research and don't just think about what you're going to buy now, but also think about your upgrade path, because decisions that you make when you buy the inverter may close off some options to you.
Yeah, you're right.
I see Steve there in the background. You've got the 3000U from Pilotech batteries there, and they're a good choice because you can expand them. It's almost become a bit of an industry standard.
Because they're modules, you can add on and add on.
Yeah, the modules, you just add them to and move a couple of leads, flip a little switch on it to say, oh, this is battery number 5, and you're in business.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they're all interlinked.
Does it feel like that
The
now?
hybrid system. I have the same problem as Michael. It's all up in the loft now because of my medical conditions. I'm struggling to get up in the loft, and so I'm trying to organise it, getting these moved.
And they're quite heavy, aren't they?
Yes, yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Quite weighty. I want
Yeah,
the whole
I-
system downstairs. It's just no good where it is.
Yeah, I've opted, the ones that I've got coming, they've opted to have them in the garage so that they can easily be moved, adapted, upgraded. And taking your point, Miles, about the inverter, the one I've gone for is one that will output at 3.86, which is the maximum you can go to without getting an approval. You can tell the network you've got that, but you go above that, you need an approval. But it has the ability to overrun to 5 kilowatt output for a 10-minute period. So when you got your kettle and your toaster on and you go over the 3.8, you're still not pulling from the grid. And so that was the research I did in it, to find an inverter which would do that for me, that had that headroom, and it will charge at 3.8 kilowatts as well, charge the batteries at that rate. Because some of the options I looked at, they look nice on paper, but when I inquired about the charge rate, it capped off. Well, it can only charge the batteries at 2 kilowatt, but it's a 3.8 inverter. Well, it isn't if it only puts 2 kilowatts into the battery. So unfortunately, you do have to ask the questions.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I didn't really know, and this is complete naivety on my point of view, is the Tesla Powerwall is a 13.8 kilowatt hour battery. Its maximum discharge rate is 5 kilowatts.
That's right.
And obviously that means that if I put my electric car on my 7 kilowatt charger, which currently doesn't have a capped limit because it's not got the solar thing tied in, it would mean that the solar, it'll start drawing 7. So it'll take 5 from the battery and 2 from the grid. Or 2 from the solar if it's available. Normally what's been happening on days where it's been cloudy, like yesterday, I've been setting my car to charge on my off-peak as soon as my off-peak starts, which is around 8:30 p.m. And then, like I say, it sort of discharges the battery for a bit, and then the battery stops being used, and it's mainly using grid. Because the grid's off-peak, I'm kind of okay with that because it's 5.5p. That's, I'm happy with that. But I say that today, I've just done it all off solar, so I've avoided using any off-peak. Hopefully today will be a first grid-free day for me, which would be pretty cool.
The good thing about staying with the charges for a minute is the fact that the Zappy, for one, well, it's not the only one now. There's several now, but it was the first, I think. The Zappy has 3 settings on it. You can either use a full 7 kilowatt, 7.2 kilowatt off the grid, or whatever you've got to feed it. Or you can have it set so that it constantly runs at 1.4 kilowatts all the time. But if there's any solar generation coming in as well at the same time, for example, today I was putting out 3.6 on the solar at one stage, and the Zappy was plugged into the car. So it was sending in total 3.6 to the car, which was what was coming off the solar. Well, then the clouds came across after a while, and that dropped down from 3.6 to about 800, 900, somewhere in that region. But the Zappy continued to put 1.4 in, and it does that all the time. It's got to have a minimum of 1.4 going through it, and that feeds consistently at 1.4. And then when the sun's out, it feeds whatever's off the sun as well. There's also another setting in the Zappy, which you probably know this, which is solar only, and it won't take nothing but solar. All it will take is solar. I never use that. The reason for that is because it tends to, when the clouds come across again and the solar power drops down to nothing, it's got to be at least 1.4. Any less than 1.4, it cuts out. And the car was constantly being switched on and switched off, switched on and switched off. And when I first got it, I thought, I don't like this, because that relay is going on and off every time the cloud comes across. So I stopped using that and use the other one now. Use the one that's constantly got 1.4 in it, whether it comes off the grid, whether it comes off the solar or off a battery, it doesn't make no difference. It constantly gets that to constant feed of 1.4 or more.
I'm conscious of the time. I just wonder if I
Yeah,
can
sorry,
press
Paul.
on.
Yeah, it's like middle of the morning for you, isn't it? At 2 a.m. or whatever. Sorry.
No, I meant in terms of the how we've got a lot of material.
Yeah, no, we have to go. We've got quite a bit to go through. Yeah. So
batteries.
batteries. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things you can do with batteries is you can shift your usage. Now, if you come home from work and that's the peak rate, so you're paying a higher rate of electric. But if you had batteries, you could have been charging the batteries during the day when you were out at work, and then use that power when the rates are higher. I mean, so that's definitely a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Another way that batteries can be used, and they're used here quite a lot, is as like a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply. So, I mean, my batteries run the whole house, but if you had a much smaller one, you could actually have like a circuit that would have your internet, some lights and things like that. So you're not trying to power the whole house from your batteries, but just like if you had a blackout or something.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing with batteries, especially here in the UK, during the winter, with my system, the inverter is able to charge from the grid to charge the batteries. So I can set it to charge the batteries overnight on the cheap on the Octopus Go, for instance, and then I am saving. I'm saving a ton of money when I'm not generating in the winter, which is really good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of a godsend. It was one of the things I asked about specifically when I looked into the system. Can it charge from the grid? And it's a godsend, absolute godsend.
I think it's fair to say. Sorry.
No, sorry, Paul. Go on.
I think it's fair to say that the batteries are the most expensive part of a solar system, and a lot of people just do the panels and the inverters. In terms of payback, the batteries tend to have the longest. And sometimes it can be difficult where the salesman has bundled it all together and says, oh, the payback of your system is this, but doesn't break it down to show you what the solar and inverter payback was on their own. So they are expensive. I got them cheap, as I said, because I imported them directly from China, but they are still quite an expensive add-on.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
What I was going to say, the thing about the battery, so in terms of software that you can use because I think part of the unknown for people who haven't got solar and batteries is that, they were wondering, do they have to physically go flick a switch to switch between solar and battery and grid and charging cut and how it all works. And I'm quite impressed with the app that I've got for my Powerwall. So basically, I go on that part of the setup is that you tell it what tariff you're on. So you tell it that I'm paying this rate for my peak rate, this rate for my off peak. It's from this time till this time, and it works out what's the most efficient, effective way to charge your battery to for when you haven't got enough solar to charge it through the day. So it'll work out that for example, it needs to charge from 8:30 p.m. in my case when the cheat rate starts, and I need to charge at such and such a rate for a period of hours to then have 50% by the end of by midnight, so that it's able to run through a good portion of the day until the solar kicks in later on or whatever. So and it will automatically work that out. So you can also set the maximum discharge level. So from 0 to 100%, you can choose, okay, I want to keep say 30% as a backup at all times. So in the event of a grid failure, I know that there's 30% in my battery that will last, that'll keep the fridges running for whatever period of time. So depending on how prone your area is to grid blackouts as to how, where you set that level. At the moment, I've only set, I think, a 10% minimum because I don't anticipate many blackouts at the moment, but possibly towards this winter, if the tabloids are to be believed, we might be seeing some more power cuts here in the UK. So, so potentially that, might be something that I'm using more often.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does somebody wanted to chip in there before I move on?
Yes. So I, with my solar setup, don't have a battery, but what I got is My Energy Eddy also. So what that does is it diverts solar power to the immersion heater on the hot water tank and just starts heating up the hot water instead. So using my hot water tank as a battery instead. So I'm not losing out. For today, there was no one in the house. There was still energy being retained into my hot water system instead.
Good. Right,
Yeah,
moving on to
So that's something that I was looking into myself, but with me having a battery and off peak, because at the moment I pay 7.8 pence per kilowatt hour for gas, and my off peak rate is 5.5 pence per kilowatt hour. So what I'm thinking of doing is just actually setting up a hot water timer for the immersion,
Exactly.
to run for the immersion to run rather than the gas, because at the moment it would be cheaper that way.
Yeah, I
And
did
if I
that.
had
I switched over last week to that because I've been keeping an eye on it, and because the gas price went up. It had been at just below 5p, and then it went up to 7 point something.
Yeah.
So I switched over the timer, and so now I'm charging during the go period in the evening to charge my water up, and that's plenty over that period while I'm waiting for my solar panels.
Yeah,
Okay.
I haven't
So that's what
used
the EV
gas.
does, isn't it? That's-
It is. Well, I think the energy waste of money personally myself, because I just have a switch on the immersion heater which I can control from my phone if I need to, if I want to. But generally, I just switch it on and let the thermostat do its job. Because once it's up to temperature, it'll stay there. It'll just trickle in as and when it needs it on the thermostat. So
Yeah,
basically, I
the
don't
problem I've got
bother.
is I've got a couple of lads that enjoy having half-hour showers. They can
Showers,
drain it.
yeah,
They can drain
Yeah.
the hot water tank very quickly. So
true.
I need to. Mine will be running an awful lot of the time. So I think what I'm looking at doing, is probably putting a timer on and running it off peak. Effectively, I'm going to be running it off solar because it'll run from the battery initially. But it'll just be another thing that I can move to my off peak. Paul, can you please continue and tell us about? So we've done financial aspects of solar. So we're talking about payback and return on investment.
Yeah, just before we do that, I was going to say that I have solar thermal, so my hot water is heated by it looks like a solar panel, but it's not a PV panel. But obviously, I live in the tropics.
Yeah, they're very popular I went to the Caribbean and they have them in Barbados. Like effectively, it's like a radiator, effectively, that absorbs heat in and then warms the water that way.
Yeah. So what are the grants like in the UK for solar?
None.
Non-existent now.
Okay, let's move on.
There are
Gone.
no grants. There are some people out there who have bought houses. Mike, have you still got a feed-in tariff on yours?
Yep.
Yeah, I have on mine as well.
20p.
One of my mates has bought he bought a house in Scotland that came with about 20 panels on the roof and with a feed-in tariff of about 25 pence, and he's laughing all the way to the bank. He gets a check every quarter.
Right, yeah, that's it.
And I was speaking to a guy the other day who's he owns like a big warehouse building and a big industrial building, and he put solar on that about 10-15 years ago, and when he was getting like 50 pence per unit, and it paid for itself in about 3 years. He says, and ever since then, he said, I just cackle every time I get the check. It's just brilliant. So there used to be very, very good incentives in terms of feed-in tariffs. At the moment, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I think we get about 3.5 pence. If you're not on a feed-in tariff, you get what they call a SEG tariff.
SEG.
Don't know, so that's
Self-generation. Self-electric generation or something it's called.
Yeah.
It's nothing. It's coppers.
Is it about 3.5, 4p, something like that?
About 3.5 pence, I think it is. 3.5, 4, yeah.
So obviously I've been trying to avoid exporting any electric, which is why I've been, as I do, washing and tumble drying in the middle of the day. My wife will be wondering what
you
on
do,
earth's
Miles.
happened.
You're
That's
so
literally like
communicated, aren't you, Miles?
Yeah, she comes home and she's like, why have you washed that bedding? Who have you had around? But I'm just trying to use as much energy as possible because there's no point me sending it to the grid when I'm going to be paying at least 5.5 and possibly 13 pence, but if I use it peak rate. So there isn't really a feed-in tariff anymore. So self-consumption is the way forward. If you have one of those existing old tariffs like Mike, am I right in thinking if you were to change the system by adding a battery, you would lose that feed-in tariff, or is it does
No.
not happen?
No.
It's if you change any of the panels.
Panels.
or mess around with the inverter that's not like a straight swap, then
You're modifying it.
change.
Yeah, you're right, Mike.
So if your consumption
Right.
goes to 100% because you got a Powerwall, you still actually theoretically get paid for that at 20 pence per unit, all the stuff that you're putting into your own battery rather than any of it going to the grid.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter where it's going.
as long as the batteries are AC coupled, you have no issues. If they're DC coupled, then there may be a bit of hoo-ha and
I
complications.
don't know.
So a Tesla Powerwall, if I add that in now, no issues.
No.
If I got a different inverter with the batteries coming off the inverter, it gets a bit questionable because of how the meter is reading the power and so on.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right, Mike.
Okay.
You see, the feed-in type when it first came out around about 2011, I think it was 2010, 11. The only drawback with it was you was limited to 4 kilowatts production maximum. That was the limit you could produce. 4 kilowatts. Any more than that, you didn't get paid for it. 4 kilowatt was the limit to get that tariff. You had to get the feed-in tariff. You couldn't go over 4 kilowatts, and everybody was struggling to get bang on 4 kilowatts. But you can't really get bang on. You get like me. I've got 3.84 up there. So it was as near as we could get at the time. When it first came out, there was a limit to 4 kilowatts.
Yeah, because there's a second reason. Not only were you capped on payments, but also you had to get, I believe, a G99 authorization from the grid.
Something like that, mate, yeah.
And back in the old days, no energy grid supplier would give it to a domestic property.
That's right.
It's like now they will.
Back in the day, then it was you were on the G99 up for up to the 4 kilowatt. Then you got capped. If you went above that, they were really looking at 3-phase and then more at 10 kilowatts and above. So there was this big gap, and so domestically, no one could install anything above that. And in fact, my one was a 4 kilowatt system, but then capped to 3.86 because that was the maximum current that they would allow you to put back into the grid.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this one, what I'm trying to do now.
Paul, you have to speak up, Paul.
I just said pressing on.
Sorry.
No, I'm just conscious of the time. We're already 15 minutes over, and we haven't got to the people talking about their systems yet. So, but I think it's important just to mention a couple of things on investment appraisal aspect, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. I mean, the one that tends to be used most is payback. How quickly will you get your money back? And people, if you tell them it's going to be 10 years, they'll say, whoa, I'm not waiting 10 years for it. But what that means is a 10-year payback is a 10% return on your investment, and you won't get 10% if you put the money in the bank. And that's actually, quite a good way of doing it, is saying, well, what did the system cost me? If I put it in the bank, what sort of return would I make? And compare that. People use the phrase return on investment, and generally they don't know what it means. Return on investment strictly takes into account all of the revenue that your system will produce over 20 years or whatever. But what they really are talking about is, like Miles is financing his system via a mortgage. What's he paying for his mortgage rate? And what sort of return is he getting compared to that? So that's the sort of thing that a simple way of saying, does this make sense, really?
Yeah, thank you. And I say the energy monitoring software to make the solar smarter, we've sort of covered that with basically, I say a lot of the apps do everything for you now. So my Tesla Powerwall app just basically, it gets on with it. I'm in the early days of basically looking at it approximately 25 times an hour. But I imagine that as you've had a solar array for a bit longer, you'll learn that it just gets on with it. But at the moment, I'm sort of looking at it and going, oh, it's generating this, or I've got this, or it's so much. And then I'm looking at it and going, well, hang on, how come Right, who's got something switched on? Who's got, which kid has gone and left a
What you do.
I've had mine a year, I still do that.
We've all done that. We've all been there and done that. You give up after a while.
Yeah.
Just to bring this back onto topic, because when I work out my payback, I include the fact that I am powering my car from my solar system. So I would say, instead of having an HS plug-in hybrid, I just have the standard HS. What would, in terms of the mileage that I'm doing, what would that cost me in fuel? And that is, I factor that in as well. So it's important to remember that if you have a solar system, you need to see the benefit of charging your car from that, and that's part of the benefit of having solar. And it makes the whole solar system a much more attractive proposition if it's powering your house and your car.
Yes, definitely.
I must have said 1,000 times the best investment I ever made was going with solar. I must have said that 1,000 times. The best investment I ever made, no matter what. That was the best.
Okay, we're going to move on to people's systems. There's a couple of videos which you can watch at your leisure, but basically I have a 20 kilowatt solar PV system, and I have 3 5 kilowatt hour kilowatt inverters, which is my main system, and my fourth system is my original inverter, which is a 10 kilowatt. So in terms of batteries, I've got 4 9 kilowatt hour lithium iron phosphate batteries, which is 36 kilowatt hours. And my original system is 38 kilowatt hours of deep cycle gel, but that's 5 years old now. But that system is, if you like, a backup to my main system. So
Very good.
That's my system. And who's next? Steve.
Miles is next, I think.
I'm just looking at the pictures in order. I think Steve's photos are next.
1 second. Yeah, I think you're right.
I've my system's a year old now. I've got 12 325 watts solar panels, making a total of 3.9 kilowatt hours. Solis hybrid inverter, a 3.6 kilowatt inverter. The 3 lithium ion batteries are behind me, which as we said, I can add on to. On a nice day like today, I can get I've had 22 kilowatts generated today, and I because I'm on disabilities, I'm at home a lot as well, so I charge my car from solar most of the time. So the benefits is just outstanding. The best investment I ever made. It really is.
Miles.
I would like to get that downstairs because I can't control it. Getting up into the loft it's hard work for me at the moment. So I'd like to get that downstairs in the kitchen so I can control it at ease.
Is it me next?
Yes.
So my system, it's only been on the roof for just over a week. So I've got 8 panels, almost sort of 390 watt panels on the roof. They've got total output of 3.12 kilowatts. As you can see on my roof, I've got like a dual height roof. It's not an extension. The house was built like that, but it just looks that way. And because my Velux windows on the lower section of the roof, it wasn't practical to fit solar panels on that section because of the shading as well. But today, I say, worked very, very well. What I would say is, I've got the Tesla Powerwall. So that comes with, I've got a solar edge inverter in the loft, similar location to Steve. And that feeds down to a Tesla box, which is the gateway, which is mounted near my porch, well, right next to the electrical install box, the electrical meter box and everything. And so that basically controls all of the energy going to the battery or going to the grid, and sorts it all out. And that's what feeds my app. And this Tesla gateway is what makes it possible to detach from the grid completely, and also act as a backup in the event of the grid falling down of its own accord. So the Tesla box goes next to your meter cabinet, or as close as it can do. And then I've got about 30 meters of cabling from there through around the corner of my house, down the side of the driveway, tunneled under to go to the garage, which is where I've got the Tesla Powerwall battery. And that weighs about 120 kilos. It's wall mounted. It's about 18 centimeters, 19 centimeters deep, so it doesn't intrude beyond where the actual door opening is. So it's quite hidden out of the way there. And I believe that I can just daisy chain a second one on top of it if I wish to in the future. But I think with my system size, I think 13.8 is probably big as I'll ever need. Having said that, I did fill it today. But yeah, so I mean, for me, it's, you know, I went with an install company that I had used before for my chargers, and a relatively local company in Yorkshire called Egg. They used to be known as the Phoenix Works, and they do a very tidy job. You know, all of the cables are run using spirit levels and everything, so it's all nice and square. It's not, you know, just cables tossed everywhere. They do a nice clean job, which is ultimately what I wanted when it's going outside of the house and you can see it from the road.
What did it cost you again?
Total cost of 15,700, including the power wall. I believe the power wall was about 9.5 grand of that cost.
Yeah.
My
I did put the tunnel in from the garage to we put a conduit for them to put the cable through from the garage. So me and my mate put that under the block paving a week or so beforehand. Just thought it's something I can physically do myself. So
my system was 8,800 all in, which was
including your battery.
Including the battery.
Yeah.
Cheap,
so I think the batteries are the majority cost there.
I went for a system called the Solar Together scheme, which is run by Solar Together and local councils. And after a lot of research, I thought this was a safe way of going. It was really good, right up to the process of where it was being fitted, and then it went all to pot. That system I have now is my second system, because the first system never worked properly. Not from the get-go. 3 months later, they swapped the system over. I have an ongoing problem with that, where it keeps chucking the battery trip switch, and I can't get the company to come out and fix it. So I just say to people, be wary of who you got fitting it. Do your research, because the biggest regret I've had on that is who fitted it. That'd be terrible.
Anyone else want to share their system?
There's some more photos on there, is there?
I think that's the end of the photos.
Well, I haven't submitted any photos because I haven't got them in yet. But what I'm having is I'm having 6 panels on an east-facing roof, because we do get very clear mornings here because I'm out near the coast. And so I've got that to pick up and sort of pump the batteries. And then at the back of the house, I've got like a W roof. So I've got only enough room for 3 panels to face south. And then it's in the valley behind. There's room for another 3 panels. So the panels all at the back, I'm having optimizers on them. And I'm having a Fox system. So the Fox system I've got will have, as I mentioned before, it's a 3.6, 3.8, something like that, nominal, but it will boost to 5 kilowatts when it's outputting switches. So that feeds only that 5 into the house. It won't feed more than the 3.8 out to the grid. And it's a hybrid system. So that means the solar panels and the batteries all connect to DC, and then that is connected to the house as AC. Miles has got the Tesla, which everything converts to AC. The AC power from the solar, you've got the Solist inverter feeds it into the house supply, and then the Tesla Powerwall pulls it off that at 230 volts and does all this magic. So my system's a bit different to that, but I think that having sort of like 4.8 kilowatts on the roof, but because of the way in which only half a time will be facing directly to the sun any one time, you can think of it as like two 6-panel systems, and each panel's a 400-watt panel. So that's what I've got, and it's going in September now.
Very good.
Cool. Les, I think we've got some photos of your.
Yeah, I've got 16 panels on the back of my house. The mainly faces southeast slightly, but the 16 panels they are in total rated at 3.84 kilowatts. I got an SMA inverter, a Sonny Boy inverter, which I insisted on having when we had them put in because that was the best on the market at the time. It's German, and it's been absolutely excellent. They've been up there now 10 years, no issues whatsoever with it over 10 years. And as I said, the best investment they ever made. I mean, today's graph, if you can see that on there, I don't know if you can see that or not, 27.3, is it 2 or 3? And you'll notice there in the middle at one stage, it was putting out over 4 kilowatts. And it's rated at 3.84, but it regularly goes over 4 kilowatts. So it's not a problem. The inverter is 4.2 kilowatts. The inverter is mild, in case you've had a problem with yours. It's 4.2, mine is, and yet the system is only rated at 3.84. But I've never had a problem. It's never peaked or anything. And it's been, as I said, many times, best investment we ever made. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the SMA Sonny Boy 4000 TL.
That's right. Yep. That's the one. That's the one. Barry, yeah, that's the one. Cracking.
I used to sell them.
I also with that one, Steve, as a monitor what's the inverters in the garage, which was the best place I was told to put it because it was cooler than the loft. And the loft gets very, very hot here.
Yeah.
So we put the inverter in the garage to keep it cool, and it loves that, no problem. And to monitor the inverter, I have a little monitor like you have these days with these smart meters, similar kind of thing. I've not got it handy, which shows me exactly what it's doing at any time.
Yeah, Sunny Beam.
Yeah, Sunny Beam. That's right, Barry. Yeah, Sunny Beam. Yeah, shows you exactly what it's doing at any time.
I bought an old British gas one off of eBay, and I've linked that up to the CT cable and use that to see just in the house.
Yeah, you probably could. Yeah.
I will get it out of the loft. It's no good there.
Yeah.
See, mine's in the loft, and I suppose I could have put it in the garage, but the garage gets as hot as the loft does really at ours, so it doesn't really make any savings because they're both the same sort of construction. Right. Well,
very good.
I think, looking around the room, I think we've pretty much covered it as much as we can today. We have run over by about half an hour. Sorry. Thank you for everyone for bearing with us. Combination of me waffling and the just being a lot to talk about, I think. Well,
very interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Well, very interesting for me. Perhaps we should have done this before I bought my system. Before we go, if you're also interested in Aura electric cars and the Aura Cat's coming to the UK soon, please sign up over at auraevs.com, which is our sister forum. That's it for the MG EVs podcast this week. My thanks go to Les Burrows, Michael Fisher, Steve Green, Paul White, Barry Hager. I've been Miles Roberts. We'll be back with another MG EVs podcast soon. If you found this podcast useful, please click on the like button and also subscribe so that you get notified next time we go live. We really appreciate it. Thanks and good night, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.